Hi everyone, it's Professor Tucker, and today we're going to talk about Chapter 5, which is Considerations for Conflict and How to Manage Conflict. And really for me, this is one of the most important and also the most interesting chapters of the book, so I hope that you enjoy this and that this recording is a bit more helpful to you. So just to kind of briefly go over what's going to be discussed, I'll define conflict, mention the myths about it, positive attitudes about conflict because conflict is not always bad, the different types, the management styles, managing interpersonal conflicts, adjusting to frustration, a working outline for conflict situations is something to consider, and situations and contexts. So to define what conflict is, I'm going to actually read the definition from the book word for word. Conflict is a disagreement between or among connected individuals and occurs in every relationship. Conflict is inevitable and is a principle of interpersonal encounters. For some, experiencing conflict is an indication that the relationship is in jeopardy. All it means is that in order to have a relationship, there will be conflict. When conflict issues arrive, you need to really consider the type of relationship and how to address these conflicts. Don't forget that conflict can be a positive thing. One positive effect of conflict is that it forces you to really take a good hard look at a problem and work towards a solution. You might emerge from the conflict with an actual stronger relationship with more open communication. Many times conflicts arise because of the lack of communication or miscommunications. Conflicts enable you to state your needs and, you won't fester in any hostile feelings that you have for this individual or any of the, contexts or situations that have occurred. You bring them to light in a conflict and hopefully you can resolve them. There are two different conflict climates. The first is defensive and the second is supportive. In a defensive climate, there's more evaluation and judgment, more criticizing of other individuals. There is a need for control, more use of strategy or hidden agenda. There is neutrality or a lack of commitment or deeper interpersonal connection to the other individual. A need for superiority and certainty, the idea that there is a right and there is a wrong. In a supportive climate, there's more description, presenting ideas or opinions. It's a problem orientation, so focusing on the task at hand and how to solve it. There's more spontaneity, being more open and honest. More empathy or understanding another person. Equality, asking for opinions on both sides. And it's more provisional, expressing a willingness to listen to the ideas of others, being open to more than one idea. Page 147 has the conflict style self-assessment. I really want you guys to take this assessment so you can figure out what kind of conflict style you actually do have. So the assessment runs over a couple of pages. Complete it and kind of start, gauging what your score can be. And the different types are competing, collaborating, compromising, avoiding, and accommodating. So check which one you are, but read about all of them on page 150 and 151. Take the time to identify individuals that you have interpersonal relationships with and what kind of conflict management style maybe they have. This can make a big difference in discussing issues and needs with other individuals. Alright, so now certain myths about conflict. First is that conflict is always bad. As I mentioned earlier, conflict's not always negative. It gets a negative image because, sometimes it can lead to negative outcomes. However, there are many positive aspects to a relational conflict. It's healthy for a relationship to get into certain conflicts, express their feelings and their ideas, getting out in the open. Relationship partners who are able to confront and solve conflicts actually end up having stronger relationships than those who don't have any conflict at all. Reason being, it's normal and it's expected to have some disagreements and conflicts in certain relationships. So if you're not having any conflicts, what is not being said on either side? Individuals who are able to deal with conflict sensitively are viewed as more competent as far as communication goes. So the idea that conflict's always bad is just a myth. Conflict occurs because of a misunderstanding and miscommunication. Many times it does, but this is not always true. The myth of this idea extends from an individual's inability to accurately communicate their goals and their ideas to one another. This is oftentimes not the case. There are many situations where people are able to communicate their goals to each other, but they're still going to disagree. A conflict can just straight up be a disagreement. You're not always going to share the same opinions. So while conflict can occur because of misunderstandings or miscommunications, sometimes you're just going to disagree. The third is that conflicts can always be resolved. Unfortunately, they can't. We would like to say we could resolve all of our conflicts, but there's no magic skills that can solve every problem. Some conflicts are just going to exist, just like certain disagreements are going to remain disagreements. It just depends on how you address it and what impact it's going to have on the relationship. The next are positive attitudes and strategies about conflict. So it's serious, but it's natural. Take the time to understand that this does happen and it's not a bad thing. When conflict is resolved effectively and with sensitivity, the pressure can release from a relationship. It can enhance that relationship. Constructive and socially sensitive approaches to conflict involve context and situation analysis. Constructive conflict involves having a climate of openness and approaches to resolution. So it's relationship and content centered, encouraging trust. This is very important. And constructive conflict resolution seeks supportive, rational, and problem-solving kinds of issue confrontation, which is the kind you want to be having. Now, there are different types of conflicts. It could be an affective conflict, a conflict of interest, a value conflict, cognitive conflicts, goal conflicts. And the book talks in detail about each of these, starting on page 154. I urge you to go through and understand the difference between all of them. So earlier I told you to take the quiz on conflict management styles and figure out which style you are. So just a refresher, on page 158 going through to 159 and 160, they talk about the different types. The first being avoidance, the notion of I lose and you lose. The second is competing. I win and you lose. There's always a winner and a loser. Compromising. I both win and lose and you both win and lose. Collaborating is a win-win situation. And then the next is accommodating. I lose, you win. So the key to managing interpersonal conflicts, there are a few different steps to take to ensure that you are putting the right amount of consideration into addressing the conflict. The first is showing willingness to manage the problem, accepting responsibility, discussing different courses of action, concessions, compromises, coaxing, and non-hostile proposals. Support your partner and also seek disclosure. So when you're assessing a conflict situation, you should really ask yourself the following questions. How critical is the conflict? Is it primarily relational or content? Is the receiver aware of the conflict? Is there a role difference? Am I prepared to lose this conflict? Preparation behaviors for conflict situations should include defining the issue or the behavior that bothers you. State the conflict specifically. Decide your communication style. Be direct. Review the positive attitudes about conflict. Make an appointment to really confront this idea. Remember, conflict is natural. When conflict is resolved with sensitivity, it can be a positive experience. It can preserve or even enhance a relationship. Constructive conflict is open, but it is relationship as well as issue-centered. It seeks an atmosphere of trust, so the more trusting you are and the more forthright you are in the conflict, the more likely that it will be resolved in a quick and efficient manner. Don't forget to take the discussion questions and responses for this chapter as well as the quiz for chapter 5. They are due along with chapters 2 through 6, so be sure that you are diligent about reviewing the chapters, these recordings, and taking the quizzes, please. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or post on the Blackboard discussion board where it says office hours or asking an instructor a question. I hope that this has helped.